everyone. Is it all right if I speak English? It's going to be English in any case this afternoon. I'll speak slowly. I'm really pleased to welcome this afternoon Martha Wilson to speak about her work with Sophie Lvoff. I'm very excited. Thank you, Simon Asensio, for this proposal to welcome them here this afternoon to hear about their work. I hope you've already seen the exhibition at the FRAC. Thank you to our partners at the FRAC Sud over in the Joliette neighborhood. It's a great show. Thank you for the exhibition. One of the grandes dames, as we say, of performance in the United States for a long time. So, looking forward to hear what you're going to tell us. So let's pass it over to you. Thank you,
Et je vais juste ajouter qu'il y a une proposition de faire un système de chuchotage, c'est-à-dire pour les personnes qui souhaitent pour faire la traduction de l'anglais vers le français. Il y a plusieurs personnes qui sont proposées pour faire le chuchotage, c'est-à-dire qu'elles peuvent chuchoter une traduction en français pour vous. Donc on est plusieurs, et si c'est OK pour vous, juste de vous identifier, de lever la main. Il y a une personne ici, une personne là. Et s'il y a des personnes qui seraient disponibles pour faire de la traduction simultanée en chuchotage, de manière à ce que des personnes qui sont moins à l'aise avec l'anglais se positionnent à côté de ces personnes pour qu'elles puissent chuchoter. Voilà. Moi, je vais me... Il y a aussi une personne ici, une personne là, et puis moi, du coup, je vais me mettre là, à côté. N'hésitez pas à vous réorganiser si vous souhaitez avoir un accès.
Hello, welcome to this conference. Thank you again so much, Martha, for being here. I'm Sophie. I am an artist living in Marseille, and I also teach at the Beaux-Arts of Nîmes, and we also are welcoming our students from Nîmes here. Thank you so much for hosting us. That's okay. And we had a visit this morning of the exhibition, and it's a pleasure to have us here. Thank you. So I'll just say the reason maybe I'm here is because I met Martha Wilson 10 years ago already in New Orleans, where I used to live and work.
Thank you for the picture.
I sent a picture from the archives last night. And we invited Martha for a conference that was called Hand in Glove. And it was a conference that existed for a number of years about the sustainability of artist-run spaces all over the country in the United States, more so. And Martha was our speaker then, and was around the whole weekend of the conference. And we stayed in touch. We saw each other in New York thereafter. And when I saw that she was having the exhibition at the FRAC, it seemed like a great opportunity to see her again. And I'm glad this could work. I wanted to do this form of discussion because we also have had this before between us, where it's a little bit more informal, a little bit more fun, perhaps for students to hear about your trajectory as an artist, as an arts worker. And I think we can kind of loosen things up a little bit like that. And in doing the research about you and your work, I came across a number of things I wanted to ask you about. And I think I wanted to start with the birth of performance arts, which is a big question, a big subject. And I was reading some of your, I think it was in your source book, which is like a compilation of many texts that were important for you, where you had a very pointed moment where you believe that the birth of performance art happened.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
Yes, yes, of course. So the Italian futurists proposed that only the future had value and that the past was passé. And they've printed up their manifesto against passéist Venice. I think there were 800,000 copies on very, very thin paper. It's about this big. And then they lugged all of these manifestos to the top of the clock tower in Venice on a Sunday. And then they waited for people to come out of church. And then they threw their manifesto off the top of the tower into the Piazza San Marco below. And people picked up the manifesto and they saw that the futurists thought that Venice should be allowed to sink into the Adriatic Sea because it represented the past and only the future had value. Well, so they ran up the clock tower and the futurist poets and painters ran down the clock tower and there was a fist fight. And I believe this was the birth of performance art. Not everybody agrees with me, but I don't agree with them either. Rosalie Goldberg believes it started in cafe society. Coco Fusco proposes that perhaps the birth of performance art was when Native Americans were presented in Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand's court in Rome. And sorry, in Madrid? Where were they? In Spain, in Spain. So there are different theories, but the reason I prefer my theory is that it's about the confrontation of ideas. I believe performance art is fundamentally about the confrontation of ideas.
And for you, those ideas at that moment, so that was, I have the date, it was July 8th, 1910.
Thank you.
And exactly in Venice, in the Piazza San Marco. And so for you, what were those ideas that were
Well,
opposing?
Nowadays we say progress is our most important product, but in those days the future was suspicious and the past had value because we understood, we knew what the past was. We valued the past. It represented us, you know, with the Italian, the French, the
European. Okay, and for you, in terms of a performance act, the dropping of the manifestos, the interaction with the public, is there anything else that's more also a time-based situation for you that can be specific to this moment, or?
Well, you used the term time-based, and I'm very happy about that because the organization that I founded in New York presents time-based art, but we didn't use that term. I thought I was collecting and presenting artist books, and then one of the artists who had donated a book to our collection, Martine Abelea, who is French and lives in Paris, said she wanted to read from her book, and she showed up in a costume. So the performance art program was born at this moment. The Franklin Furnace's performance art program was born when she showed up in a costume. And then we were showing the term artist books wasn't very clear yet either. We presented and collected both the published kind, the cheap stuff, and then also artists would do one-of-a-kind objects, and we would show that as well. After a while, the one-of-a-kind objects started to crawl across the floor and go up the walls and across the ceiling and turn into mazes made of audio tape. And so it became an installation program. This does not sound radical today, but I assure you, in New York in 1976, the uptown gallery and museum system was ignoring the downtown scene where artists were making posters and putting them on the curbs. Christy Rupp made posters for the rat population of New York and put them on the curbs. Jenny Holzer was putting her posters, Barbara Kruger, her broadsides, directly on the walls, not charging any money. You know, it's up there. You could get to look at it. So there was a chasm between the uptown art world and the downtown art world, and the downtown art world was just way more fun.
Do you remember what the costume was that she wore for her reading?
She kind of looked like a whore, as I recall.
Okay. And so I'm just pulling up some slides from Franklin Furnace. I guess I wasn't sure exactly what order we were going to go in, but maybe the next thing, if we go from the birth of performance art in your eyes, I'd like to show you this image. It's behind you. I apologize if it's...
Oh, nothing happened.
But I did mention to you I was going to use this picture.
Oh, it's a Skinner box. Good grief.
Do you want to explain
yes,
why
okay.
I'm showing this?
What the hell is this? B.F. Skinner, American psychologist, believed that the baby healthy in body would be healthy in mind. So he invented, instead of a crib, which is on the floor and has bars, it's a chamber that's at waist level for the mother with sliding glass doors. And I didn't wear diapers. You know, if I peed on the sheet, my mother would roll it up at the end. And so this notion of physical freedom is what Skinner thought would create emotional freedom. Physical freedom would create emotional freedom. Decades go by. I'm raised in a...
You're raised in this.
In the Skinner box. Well, because, okay, another little detail that makes sense here. My mother and father met in World War II. My father was designing radar, and my mother was designing radio down the hall, and everyone wore smocks to work. And then one day the entire office went to the Jersey Shore for a swimming party, and my father saw my mother in a bathing suit, and then they got together and got married and everything. But they didn't, you know, they were newlyweds and they didn't have any money. So the Skinner box that my father designed and built was on a houseboat. I was born in December. It's cold in December. There's ice under the houseboat and floating around in the Delaware River. So they thought, when I confronted them years later, how could you put me in a Skinner box? They said, it was the most advanced form of child rearing. They thought they were doing the right thing.
And so your dad built this box out of a design kit that was in a
Ladies' Home Journal. Well, he probably fabricated it from scratch himself.
And so then it's really a child care in a box.
Child care in a box.
Where you put your baby and basically just watch the baby
Yes.
when you need to watch it.
Yes.
And otherwise, the baby is left
The baby
alone.
is free to
It's
crawl
free
around.
in this box.
But decades later, after this, my shrink, my therapist, the person I saw for 10 years to help me not be crazy, pointed out that in order for me to get my mother's attention, I had to perform for her to come over and pick me up. Hence, I'm a performance artist.
And also living in windows.
And living in windows.
Because
yes,
the
I lived in a storefront, and then I lived in another storefront.
So this idea that you were raised, I think it was up until you were 2 or 3 years old.
Well, certainly for the first year, and maybe 2. My sister was in it less because she was born in March.
Okay.
Yeah.
The winter baby. So you're raised in this box. You are performing what you need to get attention from your mother, and later on it reveals to you that this is all kind of part of this performance knack that you have. Okay. And we should say that this was later found. There was a criminal process.
Well, his daughter became an artist for one thing, and then sued him because he was experimenting on her without permission.
Mm-hmm. And this was found to be
and
ineffective.
Not a good idea.
Mm-hmm. So for me, this was really. I read about this in your journals. And it was really telling for me this idea of how innate this idea of performance is for you. And then the next thing that was also quite important for you, I read, was the Seedbed by Vito Canci.
Yes.
And can you talk about your interaction with this work and
yes.
what you felt when you saw it?
Well, I didn't see it. I saw it in Artforum magazine.
Okay.
I was in Canada. Now, why was I in Canada? I graduated from college in 1969. The United States was fighting the Vietnam War. My boyfriend didn't want to get drafted into the United States Army, and our painting teacher had been hired by an art school in Canada, and he called us on the phone and said, look, this is the coolest art school in North America. You should really come up here. So I applied to Dalhousie University in the English literature program, which is across the street from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Now, why was it the coolest art school in North America? Because the president, Gary Kennedy, was inviting all of the conceptual artists of the day to come and be visiting artists at the school. So Vito Canci, Dan Graham, Joseph Beuys, Joseph Kossuth, Peter Kubelka, Lawrence Weiner, the list goes on. They're all white men, I should point out, were coming through the school. And Vito had done Seedbed. I'd seen the review in Artforum magazine, and I went to his. I think he was in residence for like a month. Mm-hmm. I went to one of his classes. He looked at my work and he said, "You should read Irving Goffman's The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life." Now, Irving Goffman, a sociologist, was outside of my sphere. As an English lit major, I had never run across him before. And it's just a little tiny book published in 1959 in which he proposes that we are all performing all the time. All of you and we are performing all the time. For whom? We're performing for our sense of self, for the others in the room, for a sense of history, perhaps, or maybe for our parents. We're all performing all the time. So you are a performance artist, whether you know it or not. And this was extremely liberating, the whole concept that I had started doing performances just to because I didn't know who I was, and I was trying to find out what it would be like to be a woman dressing as if I were a man trying to look like a woman, or being a 25-year-old artist trying to look like a 50-year-old woman who's trying to look like she is 25. So these performances were explorations of consciousness, I guess. And I believe to this day that it's important to scare yourself as an artist. It's important to try stuff that freaks you out.
And so when you read about Seedbed, was it for you something that was also incredible or liberating?
Well,
or?
it's at the time the term in use was body art.
Right.
This is art that emanates from the body. I much prefer that term to performance art, which gets confused with performing arts, dance, music, theater, and it's to, you know, to this day, those terms in English get confused. Body art is pretty clear that this is art that emanates from the body, and he was masturbating under a platform that was built at an angle inside Sonnabend Gallery, and then fantasizing about the people who were walking over his head. He would hear the footsteps of perhaps a woman wearing high heels, and then he would masturbate to the footsteps that he heard. And then later he did more body art. For example, he'd find a person and just follow them until they got home. Or he'd wait at the bottom of stairs with a lead pipe and a blindfold on. And if you came down the stairs and he heard you, he might bash you with his lead pipe. None of the other conceptual artists were doing anything like this. The breast forms permutated that was up on the wall was a joke about Saul LeWitt, who was permutating an idea. For example, every line that can be drawn between this point and that point, and in this square. I'm sorry, who cares how many lines can be drawn between this point and that point in this square? I like Saul. He's no longer with us, but I like him as a person. But he, like 99% of the other conceptual artists, they were not dealing with where ideas come from, which is out of here, out of this body that we occupy.
More analytic.
Yes, all above the chin.
And for me, when I first saw Seedbed, and also hearing you describe some of these Video Akanchi works, I mean, for me, it's quite threatening.
Oh, yes,
and
indeed.
Quite privileged. And so I'm wondering, how did you reconcile working with these conceptual artists who were coming to Halifax? Yeah. And you're also, like, yourself as a baby feminist at the time. How did that kind of work on you?
I used my woman's body as my instrument. And did you know that women are considered second-class citizens? I used my woman's body as an instrument and explored what it is to be a woman. One of the pieces that I've done that was not in this show is called A Portfolio of Models. So a woman can be a Vogue model, a goddess, let's say. She can be a goddess. She can be a housewife. She can be a secretary. She can be a professional. She can be an earth mother, or she can be a lesbian. These are the models that are held out for women. And the text for this piece basically says, look, I've tried on all of these models for size and none of them has fit, and the only choice left is to be an artist and to question my place in society.
Another time we talked over the summer when you were here for the opening of your show, I was wondering about sort of the social interaction and like if it felt kind of like a network of friends or friend artists, how did that also work on you? Like, was it supportive? Was it sort of, could you feel a kind of energy, even though, I mean, we talk a lot about, I mean, I'm from New York, so are you. I left it all behind. And I went to New Orleans, and then I went to Marseille. And so the idea to leave a center, especially such an important center of art and culture, and to say, no, I'm doing this in Halifax. No, I'm going to work and do this in New Orleans, for example. There's an energy and there's like a necessity to do things. I'm wondering if you had that kind of feeling around you in Halifax with these people coming. And you had mentioned that you also knew Lee Lozano at the time because she also was making work. She made an important work in Halifax for part of the Dropout piece, I think it was. So I'm just wondering about this network of people around you at that time.
The community of women in Halifax was competitive and not supportive. We were, we were fighting each other. We were being men. We were trying to get ahead in the art world. And in fact, the painting teacher who had been in my college painting teacher and got hired by the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, when I told him I wanted to be an artist, he said, "Women don't make it in the art world. But if you're serious, you'll make black and white art," by which he meant conceptual art like the white guys were making. And I heard that, and then I walked across the street and bought a roll of color film and started to.
And I think that's this work, right? The composure works.
Yes, that is right. That is correct. Yes. I also dressed up my boyfriend as Marcel Duchamp's female persona, Rose C'est la Vie. He looked like Marcel Duchamp, and it's a piece called Captivating a Man. So the photo was taken by Man Ray, and Rose C'est la Vie has these beautiful hands, kind of like this underneath his chin. And my boyfriend was a printmaker, so he had these big beefy hands, and I didn't know what to do with them in the photo, so I stuck them under the collar.
And so what was it like to be around Dan Graham or Lee Lozano, for example?
Oh, Lee, okay. I'm sorry, these are all personal anecdotes, but this was a good one. So it's Nova Scotia, and when you get to Nova Scotia, the touristy thing to do is to go to Peggy's Cove. And we had a car, and we drove Dan and Lee Lozano, my beautiful artist boyfriend, and I got in the car and drove to Peggy's Cove. Lee Lozano did not look out the window. She was looking at her palm.
The entire time?
The entire time, yes. And then later she did the totally famous work where she rejected women, period. She decided, well, women are obviously not powerful and can't give me anything, and so I'm just never going to speak to a woman again. And she didn't. She literally did not.
Mm. And
what was the piece she did in Halifax?
There was actually one of our colleagues in Nîmes worked about this. She made a performance, a lecture where she gave a talk where she was sober, where she was drunk, where she was stoned, and then on acid, I think. And so
I love that piece.
And so one of Maida Fortuna, who's my colleague in Nîmes, she did a lot of research about this piece and made a film about it. And it was actually during COVID while she was working on this film, and she wanted to visit the room where all of this took place, but couldn't do it. So they had to film it in another way. Yeah. And so why do you think there was you were saying
the community was hostile, because that's how men get ahead. They, stab each other in the back if necessary to advance themselves. So then was making art, and Lucy Lepard came to town and said, yes, you are an artist, and there are other women around North America and Europe who are doing this kind of work. I don't remember if she used the term feminist. Mm-hmm. And then she said, I'm going to put you in a show. She had decided, she had done the pop art show at the Museum of Modern Art. She had decided men have had enough advantage so far, so I'm just going to do shows of women. She did shows of just women for 10 years. So she put me in one of her number shows called Circa 7500, which means it started in Valencia, California, population circa 7,500. And through this catalog, I met other artists working in New York, Jackie Apple, Rita Myers, Alice Aycock, who were doing work that I thought was great, and they lived in New York. So then, my beautiful artist boyfriend, who looked like Marcel Duchamp, dumped my ass for somebody else. And I thought, okay, I'm going to move to New York and find out if I really am an artist or not. And the community in New York was completely the opposite of the community in Halifax. Women were supportive of each other. And a woman named Judy Siegel, who published Women Artist News, a newsletter, took me under her wing and took me to the consciousness-raising groups that were being organized by the National Association of Women, and then there was another one, and then there was, the third one was Crazy Artists, so I joined the third consciousness-raising group. Women were starting art schools, the Feminist Art Institute. They had founded AIR Gallery in 1972.
Which still exists.
Still exists, now in Brooklyn. Starting magazines, Heresies magazine was published by collectives of women who would coalesce around certain issues, like The Goddess, for example. There was a Goddess issue. There was a satire issue, which I was in. Anyway, now at this point, so I moved to New York in 1974, founded Franklin Furnace in 1976, and then the no-wave music scene had hit Lower Manhattan, so the artists were in bands. Robert Longo was playing guitar, Dale Kaplan was playing drums, Barbara S. was playing guitar. Everybody was in 3 bands, and I didn't know how to play any instruments, so I called up all my girlfriends who are long on concept and short on skills, and we formed Disband, the all-girl band of women artists who can't play any instruments. And so we were active from 1978 until 1982. And the songs that we wrote were, I mean, we did have props. For example, one of the songs, Donna was wearing hotel bells on her boobs with a sheet over her and a slit. So she's perhaps an Iranian woman playing her boobs. And I have a bed sheet, and I'm using it as a headscarf, shawl, apron, and menstrual pad. And then I repeat that process, and she's ringing her hotel bell boobs. And then we just decide, okay, that's enough, and we stop the song. Or we had the sad song where each of us expressed sadness in our own way. Or we had a song about...
I'm going to play a song.
You're going to play that one?
My favorite song of Disband.
Okay.
Hey, Dick. Hey, little Dicky Dick. Hey, Dick. You call that any Dick? Hey, Dick. I got the
not
only
a big dick.
Hey, Dick. Hey, Dick. What a big dick.
Hey, look, that's not a big
Look
dick.
at my dick.
Oh,
That's
no,
a big
look
dick.
at my dick.
It's the only dick.
It's still a tiny dick. It's a
But
little
it is
dick.
my dick.
Oh, that's
I
a
have
cute
a
dick.
big
Hi,
dick.
Dick.
My
Oh, what a
dick.
cute dick.
Who cares about
Hey,
your
Dick.
I care about my dick.
Cares about his dick.
Look at my dick. I have a big dick. Where's your dick? You think it's
Look at her blue balls.
I got a bigger dick.
And you got blue
bigger
balls.
dick. I got a long dick. I got a red dick. Hey dick. I got a long dick. I got a long and curly dick. Hey dick. I got a wavy dick.
You got a dirty dick.
You want to see a trick dick?
I got a
dick.
dick and white
Hey, look
Santa.
at
I got
her
a
dick.
ripple dick.
Hey, dick.
I got blue balls. I'm a macho man. That's who I am.
Hey, dick.
I got
Who
a
are
big
you,
dick.
dick? That's
I'm
what
a
you
macho
think,
man.
dick. That's what you
I got a
think,
big
dick.
dick.
I got a
That's
dick.
who I am,
I got a
man.
big
I'm
dick.
a
I got a
macho
yellow
man.
dick. I got a pink dick. I got a purple dick. Hey, dick. I
You got
got
a
a
blue
huge
balls.
dick. I got a lot of dicks. Hey, dick. Hey, dick.
Well, it helps if you know the word dick is the American term for penis. This is the song that got us thrown out of Italy. Yeah.
Okay.
Because every town in Italy has its own word for dick. It's different in each town, as I understand it. Anyway, we had performed in both Florence and then in Rome for a festival. And this song was sung in Florence. And then they canceled us in Rome. But then they realized they'd already paid us.
You still got paid.
So then we had to go on, or we were told we had to go on. And Ilona, who's a sign painter, painted up signs that said sciopero, which means on strike in Italian. So we sang a couple of songs, and then we came out on strike. And then, oh my God, the audience was practiced at going on strike. And so they're all arguing with each other about whether we're allowed to go on strike or what does this mean for the festival? And, this goes on. And we wait for a little while, and then we thought, we're going to go out and buy shoes. So we just left by the back exit and did our concert later for a lesbian bar. They were very happy to see us.
And so Disband was alive and well for 4 years.
At the end of which, in the middle of Disband, Ronald Reagan was elected President of the United States. And Ronald Reagan made it his business to dismantle the National Endowment for the Arts, which had a fellowship program that gave money directly to artists. So at the end of Disband, when we did disband, we were playing the members of Ronald Reagan's cabinet. For example, Ilona was James Watt's a tree. His name is James Watt, and he was the Interior Minister. And I was Alexander M. Plague Jr., instead of Alexander M. Haig Jr., the Secretary of State. So after disbanded, I did one performance as Alexander. I did one performance for Soho TV as Ronald Reagan, which didn't make me too happy. And then I discovered Nancy Reagan. I would just read the New York Times and underline the stuff that she had actually said. And I had my script. So I was very happy to be Nancy Reagan during the Reagan years. Then George H.W. Bush was elected. So I got the wig and got the suit and became Barbara Bush, his wife, during the Bush years. Then Bill Clinton was elected. And one day, Linda Montano called me on the phone and said, "Turn on your TV right away." It was the MTV inaugural ball. And Bill Clinton, our president of the United States, was playing the saxophone. He came out on a causeway in this sea of youth, our president is playing the saxophone. We were just overjoyed. And then Hillary followed him out. And then Al Gore, the vice president, follows him out. And then Tipper Gore came out. The mood in the room shifts. Tipper Gore was booed off the stage of the MTV inaugural ball. Does anybody know why Tipper Gore was booed off the stage?
This is the wife of Al Gore, the vice president at the time in the 90s. late 90s.
Because she instituted parental advisory language on records.
On CDs.
And CDs, which is still there today. It's a little yellow label with red type, and it says, "This record contains dirty language and you should not buy it for your children." So the youth of America didn't forget.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to be Tipper during the Clinton years. Then George W. Bush was elected, and I became the mother of the president. That was really a lot of fun. Barbara Bush was the mother of the president.
I wanted to go back to the NEA stuff, the culture wars, because it's something that was actually quite important for me when I was in art history classes in the States, where I had most of my education. But in France, I think it's something that's quite foreign, and we don't really talk about this. But at the time, in the late 1980s and 1990s, the NEA, National Endowment of the Arts, was an important funding body, national organization that gave grants, bourses, to artists and art spaces, art projects. And with the change of politics, with Reagan coming in, and more right and far right people in power, a lot of this funding got totally slashed, totally cut by half or more. And it's a very important moment in art history, because this is also a culmination of awareness about the AIDS crisis at the time, and other
and hostility towards homosexual artists.
In general, and so
3 of the NEA 4 being homosexual artists.
David Wojnarowicz,
Tim Miller.
Tim Miller, and then there's also the different pieces that were boycotted.
Yes.
And so, but the thing is that Martha Wilson was very much in the middle of this because of Franklin Furnace, which is the space that she started in 1976, where time-based and performance-based works were being shown, and a lot of, I think I read, the Franklin Furnace Aid gave either first shows or grant money to roughly half of all of the artists targeted by the far right.
That is correct, yeah.
So I'm wondering, how do you position yourself in this moment?
Now
or then? How did you manage to keep working?
Oh.
I'm trying to find a good image for this.
We got in trouble the first time. We got in trouble 4 times during the culture wars. The first time was for a show called Carnival Knowledge that asked the question, could there be such a thing as feminist pornography? And the word pornography alerted the religious right, which was not powerful at this time in the United States as they are today. But they picked up the brochure that was right on the front desk and wrote postcards from all over the country to our funders, the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and then private foundations that gave us support. Bing, 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 bing. They wrote postcards saying, we had shown pornography to 500 children per day. So that was the first round. We got in trouble. Well, then our grant was rescinded, as High Performance Magazines was rescinded, because the peer review panel loved it and passed it on for a grant of $25,000. But the National Council saw the tape. I submitted 2 videotapes, and one of them was Scarlett O, an artist who comes out dressed in a suit, pulls a dildo out of her fly, and talks about appearing to be a man and appearing to be a woman. And then as she talks about appearing to be a woman, she instructs us as to how to appear to be a hooker. You buy the wig on 14th Street, you get the suit on 23rd Street, and this is how you look as a hooker. Well, this tape was played for the National Council. That's the body over top of the National Endowment for the Arts. And the grant that had been awarded by the peer review panel, $25,000, was taken away. But by that point, now for the 4 artists who became the NEA 4, the National Council, you know, they transcribe everything, had said that the work was politically impossible. Well, that's constitutionally not defensible as a reason why to rescind a grant. So by the time the next year when my grant got around and got rescinded, the National Council said it had no artistic merit, which is a basis upon which they can rescind your grant. So just really short, at the end of the Culture Wars, the board and I had a discussion about what we should do, and we decided the internet had been invented in 1997, 6, 7, 8. We decided to go virtual because we thought that would be the next free zone. Franklin Furnace is run by artists. We're not going to tell artists what they can and can't say. And we're going to we continue to this day to give artists freedom of expression. So we thought the internet would be the next free zone for artistic expression.
And that's something I didn't actually realize until I did more research, that you were basically one of the first arts organizations trying to use the internet as a space for also giving grants to artists, for giving artists like the platform of Franklin Furnace Online to make work. And this is like, you know, in the 90s. So really 30 years before NFT and all of this, this art that has been now around already for years. And how do you feel, like, how did you, it seemed like you were also at odds with your board at this time, the people who are running Franklin Furnace, because you were really going into territory that hadn't
It was unknown. Yeah. And well, one of them said, there's no artistic merit on the internet. Mm-hmm. And so I talked to an attorney who was a father at the school where my son was going to school, and he said, you have to get more people who are artists who are creating art on the internet on your board. They can fire your ass tomorrow, so you better, you know, have a long-range plan here.
And so what was your plan? How did you convince them?
I didn't try to convince them because they had their minds made up. Mm-hmm. I just got more people on the board who were creating this kind of work, and they're all still on the board. They, you know, they've supported the organization as it goes into the virtual era, and during COVID, it turned out to be a great advantage. Because when COVID hit, the venues closed. We give grants to crazy artists, and they do their work in whatever venue is appropriate to the work. So then the venues closed. So our program director built the Franklin Furnace Loft. It's kind of full circle back to the early days, except it's an electronic presentation space. So you can be in Korea, Italy, and Southern California and be presented by Franklin Furnace in the loft.
Okay. And I think the other thing to also note is that you were kind of at the pioneer in terms of the online space, but you had mentioned before that Franklin Furnace was starting also with artist books, and so this was also something that wasn't I don't know, valued or wasn't taken seriously as a medium for artists to transmit their ideas, their work. And so in both instances, with the artist books, with the online work, this is Franklin Furnace in the pioneering space, and I think it was a huge risk. Can you talk about where are the books now?
Oh, okay. So we started collecting and presenting artist books in 1976, and by 1996 we had gathered the largest collection of artist books in the United States in a loft in Tribeca made of wood. So the board and I had a conversation about whether this was a good long-term strategy for the preservation of this field. And we decided to place the artist books in the arms of an institution that would care for them, you know, for the long term. So we made a deal with the Museum of Modern Art, New York. And they bought our collection, but we had asked the artists for 3 copies, because that's the archival standard. We didn't always get 3 copies, but mostly we got 3 copies of each book. So they kept the first copies. They sold the second copies to fund the deal, and then they returned the third copies to Franklin Furnace. So we still have a pretty good collection of artist books. We're now on the campus of Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. So next time you come to Brooklyn, you can come and see us.
And I also want to note that that was at the same time as printed matter was starting. Yes. And so what I find interesting with your work and with artist books and theirs is that you went and you stuck with the nonprofit
yes.
model. And I'm wondering, how you feel about that now, looking at what printed matter is now?
Well, printed matter is now nonprofit as well.
Is it now? Okay.
Because Ingrid Sishi became the director. Well, no, let me go back to Lucy Lepard again. Lucy Lepard was in the collective that formed Printed Matter, and she and I knew each other, and I had this loft on the ground floor in Tribeca, so I thought, fine, we'll work together, we'll be in this giant space, it'll cost me less money, we'll increase visibility for the field. All right. Willoughby Sharp, publisher of Avalanche magazine, lived on the top floor of this building. He came down the stairs with his attorney and said, "This will never be known as the Printed Matter building," effectively scaring off Printed Matter. So we made an agreement that we would divide the pie, and they would take publishing of artist books and distribution of artist books, and I would take exhibition of artist books and preservation of artist books. So we just divided the pie and kept going. And they're still in business, and we're still in business.
And what was the problem with the Avalanche guy?
He didn't rationally argue anything. He just started yelling whenever things didn't go his way.
Nice. Okay. And I think one of the last things I wanted to ask you is about the flu.
The flu.
Which I also recently discovered, and it's the magazine pamphlet that was published by Franklin Furnace for the season, with all of the happenings of what was happening in Franklin Furnace in terms of performance, but also there was columns and other opinion exhibition review. Yeah. And it's an incredible work that I didn't know about. I'm wondering, how did you do all of this?
Thank you for asking. Well, Franklin Furnace was founded in 1976, and in 1980, I had a show called Chicago that was organized by artists from Chicago, one of whom was an offset printer by day for the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And he founded a press, Chicago Books. They had published an artist book by Martha Wilson. So I knew Conrad pretty well. And he produced a publication for the Chicago exhibition. It was a tabloid, so it was about this big. And it wasn't exactly a a catalog. It's not like it listed works of art on pedestals or anything. It was kind of a work all by itself, a work of art that was in published form, which seemed like such an obviously good idea that we should be publishing a magazine. We should publish a magazine every season or maybe twice a season. So I would give the editorial control to an artist, and they might do just a poster, or they might do a half-inch thick thing the way the Chicago catalog was, or publication was. They could go crazy in this form of publication.
And you also had collaborations with other scenes in other cities. There was LA, London.
Yes, LA, London Lab, yes. Well, that was a show. I asked Suzanne Lacey to select feminist artists living in Los Angeles, and I asked Susan Hiller to select feminist artists living in London, and then we met in New York, and they did their work for each other and for the public. Rose English, Tina Keene, Sonia Knox, on the English side, on the other, Sherry Galkey, Suzanne Lacey. No, Suzanne was the curator. She didn't actually perform. The Waitresses, a group called the Waitresses. So one of the things I noticed about the LA London Lab was the artists from London were still in this sort of individualistic and combative mood. The work was feminist, but they themselves didn't collaborate, whereas the artists from Los Angeles sat on each other's laps, performed in each other's pieces. Collaboration was what they were up to in 1981.
Interesting. Do you think that had to do with school?
Yeah, well, actually, a lot of them were familiar with, had gone to Cal Arts, or were familiar with the Women House, and the Los Angeles art scene was very integrated. Mm-hmm. People were always working with each other.
I guess since we are in a school and we have many students here, I guess I would appreciate if you had, I understand that the number of art programs and art schools is much different now than it was, and we're not in New York in the 70s, but if you had some advice for our students.
Yes, you should do work that scares you. That's my advice. Do stuff that makes you feel fear.
And start a space.
Well, it's a lot of fucking work, is starting a space. But you get to meet a lot of people, which is great.
I think that's my last question, but I think we can open it for
further
students.
questions?
Yes.
Okay, sure. I have a question.
Yes.
How many of you consider yourself to be a performance artist?
No shame. There's no shame.
Good. Good. Nobody over here, though.
Yes.
Yes.
You can, yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I was thinking about, like, what does it feel like to have, like, an art exhibition in, like, a retro perspective, rather than having it, like, with more, I mean, art you make as one sample, like, one thing in common. Just, like, having something that stretches over such a long time.
Can you say that again? I didn't quite catch what you were saying.
I was thinking about, like, the exhibition that's right now.
Oh, the one in Marseille?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, like what it feels, like how it's different to make a show that's more, like, stretched over time rather than something.
Ah, I see what you're saying. Well, I have to give all the credit to Muriel Angelran, who curated that show. I had done the work, but I had never thought about aging as a concern within the body of my work, which is weird because I started doing work about aging in 1973. But, and she also, when she installed it, she didn't install it chronologically, none of that. She was doing the boob wall, for example. So I really liked how she thought about this body of work and presented it in such an original manner. The credit goes to Muriel.
And did it feel like you learned something in terms of putting on a retrospective, in terms of looking at
Yeah, get
work?
somebody who's really smart to pick the work. Do you have a question?
I do. We saw a few of your performances, right?
Oh yes, yes.
And I noticed that there was always a lot of musical performance too. Because it makes sense with the band, and a lot of singing. And I feel like nowadays maybe we're back to maybe, at least that's how I feel, maybe more separating the two scenes, like musical scene and performance or visual arts. And I was wondering for you how those two worlds kind of merge together.
Yeah. Well, it was a whole scene in New York. There wasn't any question that if you were an artist, you could play guitar. Now I think maybe the question has come back that you're supposed to stick to your role or something like that. You know, but you don't have to do that.
Kind of in the same vein, I have a question.
Yes.
Do you consider yourself as having a curatorial practice? Do you look at that activity? Do you look at all the?
No, thank you for asking. Okay, so in the early days, Jackie Apple was the first curator of Franklin Furnace. I was the director, and then a woman artist named Barbara Quinn came through the front door and said, "You need to hire me. I'm a painter, I'm a painter by day or by night, but by day I'm a fundraiser. That's what I do. I raise money." So the three blonde girls were running the joint. No, I don't know what the punchline is.
That you're not a curator.
Oh, Jackie, that's it. Jackie moved to California in 1980, and I didn't want my personal taste to be dictating the program of Franklin Furnace. So I organized a peer review panel system. So we have 5 artists looking at all the proposals that we get in. Each year, the 5 artists changes. So it moves along with the culture. And we still do it. We meet. We have a we have a performance art grant for crazy artists. That's the guidelines come out in January. The proposals are due April Fool's Day, which is April 1st, and then the panel meets somewhere in the summer, and then we announce the fund winners in the fall. And I'm very proud of the fact that the artists on the peer review panel, who are early career artists themselves, or maybe they have started to make it, but they were at one time early career artists, identify the next big thing in the art world. It goes without fail every year that they pick people who grow up to be Barbara Kruger and Jenny Holzer. And this is not to say we didn't hire curators along the way. We did hire curators for certain. Barbara Moore did the Ken Dewey show, for example.
I was really curious to hear a little bit about your relationship to feminism, like in terms of like mainstream feminism or like second wave feminism movement that emerged in the 70s. Like Sophie asked you about your relationship to the art scene throughout your career, but I was wondering also what's your relationship to the movement of the 70s?
Ah, thank you. That's a wonderful question to answer. The feminists of the 70s got a bad reputation for being so serious. And we never actually burned brassieres, but we got the reputation of being bra burners and being angry and rah. And then 1985, the Guerrilla Girls were formed. And the Guerrilla Girls figured out if we can make people laugh, then they will hear our perspective. They will hear our point of view. So the Guerrilla Girls changed feminism by making it funny. And the way they did this was one of them took on the persona of Frida Kahlo. And she would call up the Museum of Modern Art, and they would never answer her if she called as a person, as a regular artist. But Frida Kahlo's on the phone, so they picked up the phone. So they were able to get their politically active posters out to not only just on the street, but also into the brains of the uptown art world.
And I remember noting that you had a sort of conflict with Judy Chicago, where she called your work irresponsible demagoguery. Maybe you can talk about what happened with Judy.
So my beautiful artist boyfriend was being interviewed for a job at Cal Arts. This is 73, something like that. And I had the opportunity to go with him to California. Well, he was being interviewed, and I was presenting my work to the Feminist Art Workshop, which was held in the gymnasium of Cal Arts because the artists never exercised, they just did their work. So this gymnasium was available. So I showed my work, photo text work, and then Judy's there, and the classes, there's a class of young women in the room. And so Judy, at the end of this, says, well, what do you think of the work that you see here? And in the gymnasium above the seats were, and I'm not kidding, painted flowers and tits all around the top of this gymnasium. I didn't want to say it was horrifying, so I said it looked derivative. Oh my God. And she started yelling at me. I'm a 24-year-old person. She started yelling, "Don't you understand what we're trying to do here? We're trying to support these young women!" And I had no defenses, and I started to cry. Judy Chicago made me cry, and I'll never forgive her.
And then she attacked your work.
Yes, and then she attacked my work. What the heck, you know? We're on a roll here.
I had another question about a figure. So in 1976, you start Franklin Furnace, and then you also have a show at the Whitney. You have a performance at the Whitney.
Oh,
and I'm
yes.
wondering if you...
Marcia Tucker.
Yeah. How was your interaction with Marcia Tucker, who started the Whitney Museum of American Art?
No, she started the new museum. She was working at the Whitney Museum.
She was working at the Whitney and quit.
And she started... Well, they fired her ass. They fired her.
Okay.
Yeah.
And her ideas weren't meshing with those at the Whitney, and so she started the new museum, exactly.
Yes.
And so I was wondering, did you have crossover with Marcia Tucker?
Oh yeah, she was on my board in the earliest days. But let's see, the year was 1975, I think, when she invited me to be in this. I was living in Halifax, and I wrote her a letter on a piece of paper and put a stamp on an envelope, you know, and mailed it. And she saw that I was a performance artist, and she was organizing this festival. So it was Julia Hayward and Laurie Anderson and I was in, and were there men? Yes, there were also men in the show.
Mm-hmm.
I was in this performance art context. At this point in her career at the Whitney, she refused to sharpen pencils for one of the trustees or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they found a festival of performance art to be a problem.
I think that's what
troubling.
got her fired.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. So I was responsible.
And talking about performance art, like what's the thing that helps you while you're working and you have an idea? What's the thing that helps you go forward with it, like push it forward? How do you get the inspiration, or how do you say like, okay, this is such?
That's well, you can take drugs, but you have to just keep doing it. You have to keep pushing. And like I said, if you if you do work that scares you, it's probably the best work that you can do.
How do you see feminism in performing art in the future? Like, what's your personal relationship with it?
Yeah.
Or better ask,
what's happening in feminism now?
In the future.
And in the future.
I think you win some and you lose some. I see women as CEOs of corporations and presidents of countries, but we're still second class. So I don't.
It was a Facebook post.
We have to keep somehow keep working at it. Well, you know what? Your generation is going to solve this problem by becoming transgender. You're all going to be transgender, and then there won't be any male and female anymore. Does that answer your question?
I have a question. It's oddly specific. It's about one of your pieces that I saw at the exposition today, and it marked me a lot. It's called Mona, Martha, Marge.
Yes.
The Simpsons. And so I was wondering, can you tell us more about this piece? What was the inspiration? And if you have a message, what is it behind it?
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
The Mona Lisa is the highest of high art. Marge Simpson is the lowest of popular art. And Martha's in the middle. I'm living in both worlds. So I had a friend who knows how to do Photoshop build the sky. You know, for Marge's hair, we had to build Leonardo's background much higher. And she then took Martha's features and plugged them in where Mona Lisa's features are. So it's my eyes, nose, and mouth. It's about so-called high art and so-called low art, and how we artists have to operate in that, both in that dualistic world.
And then there's this small mustache that appears.
Oh yeah. So Marcel Duchamp bought a postcard of the Mona Lisa and drew a mustache and a goatee on it. And so, again, with the help of my friend who found the guy who invented lenticular photography, as you walk past the image, the goatee and the mustache appears, and then it disappears and appears and disappears. So the title of the work is actually Mona, Marcel, Marge, or Mona, Martha, Marge, depending on where you're standing.
applaudissements pour Sophie Lvoff.